So I have a problem with this. There's sort of this floating around in the ethos of public consciousness. There's like this concept of continuity of self or that sort of thing. Like there's this idea that like if you look back 10 years, it's like you were a different person or something, or like some people can be like, oh, you're still the same. I don't know, say you meet out with someone who you used to be friends with in school and you're like, oh yeah, you're still the same as how you used to be. Or there's other people who have the theory of like, how do you know that when you go to sleep and then when you wake up the next day you're still the same person? Or like you can't prove it. You can't. How do you know that you're not the same person, or you are the same person as when you went to sleep? You know, that's a pretty common one. It's kind of a ship of Theseus type. Is that what it's called? Ship of Theseus? Zeno? Something about some guy called Zeno, some Greek lad. I don't know. I don't know my shit. But either way, there's this idea. There's this sort of like a lot of argument that goes on around this kind of stuff, right? Or I don't even know if argument is the right word, but there's a lot of thought around this subject, and it's sort of like a thought experiment, I guess. The idea of, oh, you're a different person every time you wake up. But then on the other hand, there is some truth to it that everyone can accept. I mean, your cells are replaced, like after a certain amount of time, every cell in your body is completely different, right? Your cells get replaced as time goes on. So the question becomes, why doesn't everyone just accept that as true? That there is no such thing as continuity of self. And the entire concept of an individual is just flawed from the very get-go. This is I mean, I constantly have to talk about on this channel. I mean, I've kind of not done it for a while because I'm so obsessed with it that like I think people are just going to get bored. But I'm constantly talking about how I don't like the concept of individuality. It's in all my songs. It's fucking everything. It's about how I disagree with the common concept of individuality, right? Oh fuck, I died. I should have known that was gonna happen. Yeah, even the first instrumentality, the first line on that song is about individual. I mean, you are not an individual is like the chorus of that song. I'm always talking about this shit. There's so many layers to it, I can't put into words, and this is one of them that I haven't really gone into depth with, because I keep talking about it in regards, in context of the internet, right? That like the idea of the individual has been proven wrong or has been made irrelevant by the invention of the wired, or something along those lines. It's been the invention of the individual has been threatened by the existence of the wired, and that's why we have all this hyper-identitarian movements right now. As identity, the concept of identity, it's the death throes of the concept of identity, right? And I'm not just talking about mer SJWs here, and I'm not trying to say that mer identity politics is hashtag ruining leftism or whatever you want to fucking say. It's a little more nuanced than that, but you know, there's left identitarianism, there's right identitarianism, and it's all part of this sort of the death rows of the concept of identity. As our culture shifts away from this outdated, archaic concept of identity, there are those who, whether they realize it or not, just want to stick to these old ways of being, right? Whether it's for personal gain or principle, or I mean, there's many reasons. Not everyone who's or who's pro-identity, like most people probably wouldn't even class themselves as pro or anti-identity. Like there's a few people who call themselves identitarians, like on the right, but top mid. Oh, they're all T-spawn camping. There's a few people on the right who call themselves like white identitarianisms or something like that, but most people don't call themselves identitarians, or like the concept of identity itself is normally not a part of how they, ironically, self-identify, but the idea that identity is something that is incredibly important is prevalent in a lot of ideologies. Now, I've seen this excuse being used as a sort of facade for just unabashed transphobia and stuff like that. I mean, personally, I think that if you want to dismantle identity, the first step is to make it more malleable, and transgenderism and all that sort of thing is sort of a first step in the right direction. So I'm cool with all that shit, as you should probably expect, if you know who the fuck I am. But since I've only been talking about this in the context of the internet this whole time, we miss out on this entire thing, which I've barely mentioned because it's really hard to put into words, of identity. Make sure I'm still recording. Yeah, I've done this before. The reason I keep doing that is because the other day I recorded a really long video, and when I went to check, I stopped recording halfway through and I missed most of the thing. Anyway, the idea, it's not just meat space. Meat space makes it more apparent, but there have been those throughout history. I mean, a lot of them have been generally more interested in the esoteric arts and stuff like that. I know why I called it that, like some sort of pretentious arsehole, but I'm not sure what a more efficient term is. Magic with a K. Magic spelled MAGYK or something. I don't fucking know. But that sort of bullshit. Where's the bomb? Where's the bomb? I'm really trying here. What the fuck just happened? Oh my god, that was the worst round of my entire life. That was very distracting. This is really hard. I shouldn't have tried to do this. Identity. The individual is a failing concept. It's a failing ideology of downwingers who are just fucking bullshitting. You know what I'm saying. I don't need to explain this to you, and if I do, then get the fuck off of this channel. What I'm trying to say is that just because I tend to focus on identity and meat space doesn't mean that there isn't a crossover. It's like you people haven't even watched Lane. A side note, I've seen Daymaster's video on Lane, and especially because it just got reposted on Mr. Cynical's channel. It's just wrong. It's just so incorrect. It's just so obviously, blatantly wrong that no, I don't mean to have anything against that person, but I mean, I have something against Mr. Cynical. I find his videos boring, but I don't have anything against... I just think common misinterpretations of Lane. Because people look at Lane as if Lane is just the show Serial Experiments Lane. Lane has never and will never be the show Serial Experiments Lane. Oh my god. People are so stupid. Yeah, once again, completely ignoring the focus on the destruction and metamorphosis of the concept of identity, the whole... I don't even know if death of identity is probably something that someone would say somewhere in the world, but you know, what I mean is, even if you look at meat space, identity has never been as solid as it's generally seen as. It's kind of like, it's actually an extension of it's actually, if you want to learn more about this, queer theory is a good place to start, because a lot of queer theorists have been making similar points but to do with gender identity for a long time. Obviously something like Xenofeminist Manifesto or Gender Accelerationism, or I mean, you can go back and read some... I'm not the most well versed in queer feminist theory, and I mean, look at me, but they break down, if you can apply that stuff to identity, all identity as a whole, And even stuff that generally isn't seen as something that can be malleable, I think in the future will be more... Hey, I feel like I have to say this, even though I fucking shouldn't have to say this, but I know people will misinterpret me because no one knows how to do any sort of comprehension of anything. They're rushing lower tunnels. No one could possibly ever know what the fuck I'm talking about whenever I say any words. So I have to just make it super obvious, which is I shouldn't be doing, but I feel like I have no choice, you know. And that is to clarify that I'm not making any moral statements. I'm not taking any moral stances. When I say, like, identity is dying or something like that, I'm not trying to say identity is bad. What I'm saying is, it's just a fucking material analysis, right? I really shouldn't have to explain that to you. So when I say something like what I'm about to say, which is even identities that aren't traditionally seen or aren't seen now as malleable, like gender wasn't seen as malleable for most of human history, but guess what? It's now seen as pretty fucking malleable. So we're going to find out that there's even more grey areas, and some people are going to be really shocked by this, and some people are going to be have just been like, yeah, I've been saying this the entire time. What the fuck were you people thinking? One of these things I suspect is probably going to be race. I think that's going to cause a lot of shock. I think changes in what it means to be a race is going to be an interesting one, because any post-colonialist will tell you that race is not actually a physical... It doesn't mean anything. It's just a concept, if you want to put it that way. Like, it's just a... race isn't... race has no basis in science. It's just a... I don't even know what the word is that people use, but it's not like a scientific category unless you're like a idiot neo-Nazi type that believes in haplogroups or whatever, which is pseudoscience, by the way. Look it up, you fucking idiot. But yeah, race is like, for example, race is malleable. Throughout history, it's been malleable. Let me just make sure my phone isn't like running out of charge or anything. Like, for example, how race is some kind of similar to it. It's not defined by what it is. It's more defined by what it isn't. And I think we'll start seeing some examples of perceptions of that sort of thing changing as time goes on. I'm using race here specifically just as an example because I think it's something that's obviously going to change. I can guarantee you there's going to be more, and I mean, this sort of thing is very difficult to predict. As soon as you make a prediction... What the fuck? My own teammate just shot me in the head. What the fuck just happened? Anyway, yeah, so because the idea of continuity of self at its very basis is flawed. There is no... The self is something that can be many different things to many different people. Did you even watch Evangelion? I mean, this stuff is so difficult to put into words. This is why I end up just like making music about it and shit. But even that can't describe it, like, to anyone who isn't me. It's all about identity in the self. There's a difference between me and I. That's the best way to put it. There's me and then there's I. There's myself and there's me. Oh yeah, that's it. There's myself and there's me, because myself implies ownership. It belongs to... It's the self that belongs to me. If you were to break that piece down into... that word down into its parts, right? It's not just... me is there, you can't break it down. But myself is the self that belongs to me. It's possessive of the self, right? Just something to keep in mind. So, because we know that if you look close enough, you'll see that we're not just living in reality. There are concurrent realities existing simultaneously, and in the same way, the self exists within reality. Therefore, there are concurrent selves existing simultaneously, and those concurrent selves have impacts on their respective realities. And the realities, as I said, they're not asynchronous. They are synchronized. They are interlocked. They're like it's not a layers like it's not like an onion. It's not like a Christmas present. It's more like a sort of goop or a sponge like material, where the layers sort of, they're not separated. They interlock with each other, and there's little holes between them. That's how it works. So when you say something like there is a self, I mean, there is a self, but there's also a bunch of other selves. And saying myself doesn't make any sense, because that is a oxymoron. Myself, the self that belongs to me, but the me, according to most people, me is the self. So how can you have your own, like, so what's the alternative? Why specify myself if there isn't multiple selves? See, it's already built into the language. This is how we know it's true. We already have language for this, and the word myself dates back a very long time. In fact, I'm going to look it up right now. Myself, root of language. I'm sure that's how it will come up. What's it called? Like the history of language? I'll look it up later and make another video on it or something, but yeah. The word myself is a dead giveaway, right? So it shows you that there is actually me refers to something different than myself, because me is closer to the body without organs, or this creative nothing, although neither of those fully describe it. I don't think anyone can fully describe it. It's sort of beyond language. It's sort of beyond perception, in fact. It's definitely beyond perception. It's more of a, I hate to use this because it's kind of a cliche in philosophical circles, but it's a little bit like some sort of eldritch or horror. The self is kind of an eldritch horror. Some people like to say language is like a horror like that. I think that's wrong. And hey, maybe I only think this way because I lack self-awareness or something. But I still believe this, that the self is... I don't know. I don't want to use that terminology because it's not accurate, but that's just the closest I can really think of to describe how I perceive it. And of course, my perception is limited and likely incorrect, and I'm sure you all have different perceptions of what the creative nothing is. But that word or that phrase, creative nothing, it comes close to describing it. This is, in my opinion, the best thing that Stirner did with this philosophy, is the concept of the creative nothing, long before anyone else was saying things like that. Well, not that long before, because let's be honest, the Buddhists, the Eastern philosophers, were pretty fucking far ahead of us when it came to this sort of shit. If you look at like Mono no Aware or something like that, the self is kind of like the self is kind of like an embodiment of Mono no Aware. Does that make any sense? Not really. If you describe the self, like when you look really close, these things just don't work anymore. Because like when I'm trying to talk about it, I would have to write. You can't physically. You'd have to use every word in the dictionary to describe the self, because it doesn't have a description. It's indescribable by nature. There you go.